जैन आगमा ज्ञान।
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्.
Dharma Kumar. Long ago in the land of Jambudvip, there was a city called Kamalapur. The king of that city was named Shaharaksha. One day in the king's court came an astrologer. The king asked the astrologer if he knew what was going to happen in the future. The astrologer did not say a word. The king asked him second time. He told the king, a severe famine is going to break out and it will wipe out the entire city. The king did not like what he heard. He called his ministers and asked them to work out a plan where they could save the people. The ministers suggested that they should buy as much grain as possible. The king emptied his treasury and brought as much grain as he could. He stored the grain for bad days to come. Later in the month of Ashada, the sky was covered by dark clouds. The king looked up at the sky and thought it would rain. These and subsequently other clouds brought enough rain for people to grow good crops. In a way, king was happy for the people, but at the same time he was puzzled why astrologers' forecast turned out wrong. A few days later, the king's gardener came to the king with a message. The message was that a Jain Muni would like to stay in his royal park for the monsoon period. The Muni was a Kevalgyani, omniscient, one who knows past, present, and future all at the same time. The king rewarded the gardener for the message and asked the people of the city to welcome the sage. The king went to visit the Muni and listened to his holy words. The king then asked, how could the words of the astrologer not be true? The Muni told the king, the famine was averted because of the birth of a pious soul in your city. The astrologer did not know that. The king asked him to tell about the previous life of this pious soul. The Muni stated, in the land of Bharat there was a city called Purimatala. In the city there was a rich man who suddenly became sick. He tried his best to improve his health, but did not succeed. One day he met a monk, and after listening to the sermon, he decided to give up his regular diet and only eat simple foods cooked without any spices or salt. He also decided to meditate regularly and observe celibacy. His health improved within a few days. His pledge grew stronger now, so he continued his diet, meditation, and celibacy. Later there was a famine in the city, and he used all his wealth to feed the people. This helped people to survive the famine. After he finished his life, he was reborn as a Deva, and from there he was reborn in your city as the son of a Shravika named Shubhuddhi. This king was very happy to hear this. He went to Subhuddhi's house to pay respect to the pious soul. He saw the child and blessed him and gave him the name Dharma Kumar, prince of son of religion. When Dharma Kumar grew up, he married a beautiful religious young woman. In his later years, he joined the holy order of monks, and after performing austerities and meditation, he attained Keval Jnana and got liberated.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते.
जैन आगमा ज्ञान.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्.
Dreams of Mother Trishala. Tirthankar Mahavir's soul was an angel in the 10th heaven before being born as Prince Vardhaman. At midnight on the 6th day of the bright half of Ashada, his Ayushya karma ended, and so did his life as an angel. His soul came to earth and was conceived in the womb of Brahmin lady named Devananda. That night Devananda had 14 unusual and great dreams. She woke up and told her husband about the dreams. He told her that their son would be a great one and gifted with many virtues. After 82 days, on the 13th day of the month of Asho, Swadharma Indra, the king of angels, was in his court. His throne started shaking, so he used his Avadhigyan, a special mental power through which one can see distant things, to see what was going on. He learned that Lord Mahavira's soul was conceived in Devananda's womb. For a moment he was puzzled, but then he realized that this was the result of Lord Mahavira's Gotra karmas from his previous life. He said to himself, "No, Tirthankar Bhagwan is never born in a low status family. This should not happen to Mahavir. I'll move his soul to a high status family." So Dharma summoned angel Hari Naigameshin to his court and commanded him to transplant the fetus from the womb of Devananda to the womb of Queen Trishala, the wife of King Siddhartha, and to put Queen Trishala's fetus in Devananda's womb. Angel Harinaiva Gameshin left the court of King Swadharma Indra to go to Devananda's home. With his divine speed, he soon arrived at the bedside of Devananda and paid his reverence to the soul of Lord Mahavira. With his divine power, he put Devananda into a deep sleep, removed the fetus, and then left to go to Queen Trishala's palace. Again, with his divine speed, he reached Queen Trishala's palace within a very short time. He used his divine power to put Queen Trishala into a deep sleep, and then he performed the exchange of the fetus. Once again he paid reverence to Lord Mahavira's soul. Then he left with the fetus of Queen Trishala and went to Devananda's home to replace the fetus in her womb. The Gumbaras do not believe in the fetus transfer part. That night Queen Trishala had those 14 great dreams. The dreams filled her with wonder and joy. She woke up her husband and King Siddhartha and told him that she saw in the 14 dreams. He told her that those dreams seemed very auspicious. The next day King Siddhartha summoned the scholars to his court and asked them about the meaning of this dream. Digambara sect does not believe Prince Vardhaman being conceived by Devananda. The first dream Queen Trishala had was an elephant. It was a big, tall and impetuous with 4 tusks. It was an auspicious elephant and was endowed with all the desirable marks of excellence. This dream indicated that she would give birth to a child with exceptionally high character. The 4 tusks signified that he would guide the spiritual chariot with its 4 components: monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen. The second dream Queen Trishala had was a bull. The bull was noble, grand, and had a majestic hum. It had the fine, bright, and soft hairs on its body. Its horns were superb and sharply pointed. This dream indicated that her son would be highly religious and a great spiritual teacher. he would help cultivate the religion. The third dream Queen Trishula had was of a magnificent lion. His claws were beautiful and well poised. The lion had a large, well-rounded head and sharp teeth. His lips were perfect and his eyes were sharp and glowing. His tail was impressively long and well shaped. Queen saw this lion descending towards her and entering her mouth. This dream indicated that her son would be as powerful and strong as the lion. He would be fearless, almighty, and capable of ruling the world. The fourth dream Queen Trishula had was the goddess Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, prosperity, and power. She was seated on a lotus and wore many rows of pearls interlaced with emeralds and a garland of gold. A pair of earrings hung over her shoulder with dazzling beauty. This dream indicated that her son would enjoy great wealth and splendor. He would be a Tirthankar, the supreme benefactor of all. The fifth dream Queen Trishula had was of a beautiful garland descending from the sky. It smelled mixed fragrances of different flowers. The flowers bloomed during the different seasons. The whole universe was filled with their fragrance. This dream indicated that the fragrance of her son's teaching will spread throughout the universe and he would be respected by all. The sixth dream Queen Trishula had was of a full moon. It was a very auspicious sight. The moon was at its full glory. It was as bright as a star. It awoke the lilies to full bloom. This dream indicated that the child would help lessen the suffering of all living beings. He would bring the peace to the world. He would help the spiritual progress of entire humanity at large. The seventh dream Queen Trishula had was of the bright sun. The sun was shining to destroy the darkness. It was as bright as the flames of the forest fire. The sun rose and ended the evil activities of the creatures who thrive at night. This dream indicated that her son would have the supreme knowledge and would dispel the darkness of the delusion. The eighth dream Queen Trishula had was of a large flag flying on a golden stick. The flag fluttered softly and auspiciously in the gentle breeze. It attracted the eyes of the all. A radiant lion was pictured on it. This dream indicated that her son would carry the banner of the religion. He would reinstate the religious order throughout the universe. The ninth dream Queen Trishula had was of a golden vase filled with the clear water. It was a magnificent, beautiful, and bright vase. It was decorated with a garland. This dream indicated that her son would be perfect in all virtues and would be full of compassion for all living beings. He would be a supreme religious personality. The 10th dream Queen Trishula had was of a lake full of lotuses. Thousands of lotuses were floating in the lake and they all bloomed and opened at the touch of the sun's rays. The lotuses had a very sweet fragrance. This dream indicated that her son would be beyond worldly attachment. He would help liberate human beings who were tangled in the cycles of birth, death, and misery. The 11th dream Queen Trishula had was of an ocean. Its water rose in all the directions to great heights. The wind blew gently and created the waves. This dream indicated that her son would have a serene and pleasant personality. He would achieve the infinite perception and knowledge and would escape from worldly life, which is the ocean of birth and death and the misery. This would lead his soul to the moksha, liberation. The 12th dream Queen Trishula had was of a celestial plane. The plane resounded with celestial music. It was saturated with the pleasant and spiritual aroma of the incense. This dream indicated that all the angels in the heaven would respect, honor, and salute her son's spiritual teachings. The 13th dream Queen Trishula had was of a big heap of jewels. It was a mixture of all types of gems and precious stones. This dream indicated that her son would have infinite virtues and wisdom, and he would attain the supreme spirit. The 14th dream Queen Trishula had was of a smokeless fire. The fire burned with great intensity, but there was no smoke. This dream indicated that her son would reform and restore the religious order. He would remove blind faith and orthodox rituals. Furthermore, he would burn or destroy his karmas and attain salvation. Some scriptures say that Queen Trishula had 16 dreams. The 15th dream was of a pair of fish, which indicated that her son would be extremely handsome. The 16th dream was of a lofty throne, which indicated that person would have a very high spiritual status. The throne was the indication. To summarize, the indication of all these dreams is that the child to be born would be very strong, courageous, and filled with virtues. He would be very religious and would become a great king or a spiritual leader, who would reform and restore the religious order and guide all the creatures of the universe to attain salvation. He would also be liberated. Lord Mahavira was born on the 13th day of the bright half of the month Chaitra, 543 years before the Vikram era, that is in the 599 BC.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोस्तुते.
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्.
Elephant and the Blind Man. Once upon a time there lived 6 blind men in a village. One day the villagers told them, "Hey, there is an elephant in the village today." They had no idea what an elephant is. They decided, even though we would not be able to see it, let us go and feel it anyway. All of them went where the elephant was. Every one of them touched the elephant. "Hey, the elephant is a pillar," said the first man who touched his leg. "Oh no, it's like a rope," said the second man who touched the tail. "Oh no, it is like a thick branch of a tree," said the third man who touched the trunk of the elephant. "It is like a big hand fan," said the fourth man who touched the ear of the elephant. "It is like a huge wall," said the fifth man who touched the belly of the elephant. "It is like a solid pipe," said the sixth man who touched the tusk of the elephant. They began to argue about the elephant, and every one of them insisted that he was right. It looked like they were getting agitated. A wise man was passing by and he saw this. He stopped and asked them, "What is the matter?" They said, "We cannot agree to what the elephant is like." Each one of them told what he thought the elephant was like. The wise man calmly explained to them, "All of you are right. The reason every one of you is telling is differently because each one of you touched the different part of the elephant. So actually the elephant has all those features what you all said." "Oh," everybody said. There was no more fight. They felt happy that they were all right. The moral of the story is that there may be some truth to what someone says. Sometimes we can see the truth and sometimes not, because they may have different perspective which we may not agree to. So rather than arguing like the blind men, we should say, maybe you have your reasons. This way we don't get in argument. In Jainism, it is explained that truth can be stated in 7 different ways. So you can see how broad our religion is. It touches us to be tolerant towards others for their viewpoint. It also gives us to live in harmony with the people of different thinking. This is known as Syadhavada, Anekavada, Kantavada, or the theory of manifold predictions.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते।
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्।
From robbery to Keval Gyan. In a town there lived a gentleman with his lovely wife. Many nights he would not feel sleepy. He used that time to perform samayik, sitting calmly in meditation or reading spiritual books. One night 4 robbers came to his town. While deciding where to rob, they came near his house. They felt that his house was quiet and decided to rob here. The robbers entered his house. Actually, at that time, the owner was sitting in Samayak. He heard some noise and he realized the robbers are in the house. He did not scream but told to himself, "No one can take what is mine. I have right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct. Therefore, I should not be upset at the robbers, and I must not disturb my Samayak." He further thought, "I am in Samayak and no worldly thing should bother me. What did I bring with me when I was born, and what would go with me when I die? I came alone and I will leave this world empty-handed. Let there be trust in the path shown by Jinnah. He will give me the strength to complete this Samayak in a peaceful frame of mind." Meanwhile, one of the robbers threw a bundle of goods out of the window. The gentleman uttered, "Namo Hariyantana." When the robbers heard that, they were startled that instead screaming, they heard Namo Hariyantana, Namo Hariyantana, also reminded them as if they have heard before. They started reflecting on these words, and within a few minutes they attained Jati Smaran, Gyan, knowledge of previous life. They discovered that they were also Jains like him and performed Samyak but not like him. They praised his detachment for worldly things and repented on their current activities. They reflected on the purity of Samyak. They sincerely and they burnt up their 4 gati, major karmas, and all 4 attained the Keval Gyan. When the gentleman finished his Samyak, he saw the 4 Kevalis seated on golden lotuses. He bowed down to them with admiration. If we repent our mistakes and sins, we can also get into a pure mental condition. Religious rituals are worthwhile, but if we do not observe them properly with pure heart and mind, then they are meaningless. One who repents his sins and decides not to repeat them would be born either in heaven or may even be liberated in some life.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोस्तुते।
जैन आगमा ज्ञान।
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्।
Ganadhar Sudharma Swami. Sudharma Swami was the fifth Ganadhar of Lord Mahavira. Ganadhar means a group leader. Lord Mahavira had many pupils. They were divided into 11 groups and each of them was placed under one Ganadhar. As such, there were 11 Ganadhars in all. The first and foremost was Gautam Swami, whose idol you might have seen in the temple. Actually, Gautam is his last name because he belonged to the Gautama clan. His first name was Indrabhuti, but he is popularly known as Gautam Swami. Even Lord Mahavira used to call him Goyam, which is the Ardhamagadhi version of Gautam. Sudharma Swami was the son of a learned Brahmin named Dhamil, who lived in a village called Kolog, situated in the present state of Bihar. The place is now known as Kolua, and according to the archaeologists, it is the place where great pandits like Vyakta and Sudharma had their schools in ancient times. Dhamil was childless. His wife Bhadila was therefore craving for a child and worshipped the goddess Saraswati for that purpose. It is said that the goddess was pleased by her devotion and blessed her to give a highly accomplished son. Soon after that, Bhadila became pregnant and in due course she gave birth to a son who was named Sudharma. That happened in 607 BC, which means Sudharma Swami was 8 years older than Lord Mahavira. The boy grew up under the loving care of his parents. At the proper age, he was sent to a well-known ashram school where he studied Vedas, Upanishads and all other Brahminical literature. By the time he came back from the school, he was known as a learned Pandit and his fame had spread around about. He then started his own school, which became a great center of learning. Pupils used to come there from all over the country. There were more than 500 students studying under him. At that time in Pavapuri, a city of Bihar, there was a prosperous Brahmin named Somil. Once he decided to organize a great sacrifice. He wanted all the well-known learned men to come on that occasion. Indrabhuti Gautam, who was the most learned Brahmin of the time, was going to be the presiding priest. His equally learned brothers, Agnibhuti and Vayubhuti, were going to sit by his side. Vyakta and other well-known pandits were also scheduled to remain present on that occasion. Somil had come to know about Sudharma and had sent the invitation to him. Sudharma did not wish to miss the opportunity to attend that great sacrifice. However, he was eager to see the Gautam brothers. He therefore willingly accepted Somil's invitation. At the appointed time, the sacrifice started in right earnest. Oblations began to be offered together with the recitation of the appropriate verses. As the sacrificial smoke rose towards the sky, they noticed the celestial vehicles coming down. Indrabhuti and other priests were satisfied that they could induce the celestial beings to come down to accept the oblations. They were, however, disappointed to see that the vehicles had diverted their direction and were descending at the other end of the city. They could not make out why, forsaking their great performance, the vehicles were bound towards a different destination. What happened was that after attaining omniscience, Lord Mahavira had arrived at Pavapuri that very time. The heavenly beings were therefore coming down to pay their homage to the Lord and to listen to his sermon. Indrabhuti was surprised to know that he had never come across anyone more knowledgeable than himself. He therefore guessed that Mahavira might be an impostor who could have somehow impressed the heavenly beings. It was therefore necessary to counter his tactics immediately. With that intention, Indrabhuti went towards the camping ground of the Lord. As he approached, the Lord welcomed him by calling his name. Indrabhuti was astonished that the impostor even knew his name. But as he looked at the Lord, he was impressed by his personality. His pride began to melt. The Lord soon asked him, Gautam, a doubt still lurks in your mind about the independent existence of the soul, isn't that? Indrabhuti was dumbfounded to hear those words, because he did not have such a doubt. The Lord then quoted the relevant sutra from Veda itself and explained that there was no reason to hold such a doubt. With that clarification, the doubt of Indrabhuti was eradicated. Thereupon he decided to accept the Lord as his Guru. So falling at the feet of the Lord, he requested to be accepted as a pupil. The Lord was pleased to accede to the request and initiated him as the first pupil. As Indrabhuti did not come back, his brothers Agnibhuti and Vayubhuti and other pandits like Vyakta went to the Lord one after another. The Lord welcomed them and pointing out their doubts pertaining to the soul, he gave them the convincing replies. All of them were satisfied with the Lord's elucidation and became his pupils along with their own followers. Now it came to the turn of Sudharma. He had the concept that everything being could be reincarnated in its own species. In other words, human beings could be reborn as human only. His belief was based on the analogy of plant life. An apple tree, for instance, would produce the seeds from which only apple trees can come out. The Lord welcomed him too, and pointing out his doubt, he explained that as different types of plants could be produced by crossbreeding, so human beings could be reincarnated as humans or heavenly beings or even as animals depending upon their tendencies and longings. Sudharma was convinced with that explanation and became the Lord's pupil along with his 500 followers. As a Ganadhar of the Lord, he came to be known as Sudharma Swami. This happened during the 42nd year of the Lord. The 11 Pandits who had come from Somil's sacrifice became his first pupils and later came to be known as Ganadhar. Therefore, the Lord lived for 30 years. During that period, he continued to move in different parts of the country in order to lay down the path of liberation. During his discourses, Sudharma Swami always sat in front of him and carefully listened to what the Lord had to say. That enabled him to compose the Lord's teachings in the form of agamas. By the time of the Lord's Nirvana in 527 BC, 9 of the 11 Ganadhars had passed away and only Gautam Swami and Sudharma Swami had survived. Since Gautam Swami had attained omniscience in the very night of Lord's Nirvana, the administration of the order was left to Sudharma Swami. During the next 12 years that he remained at the helm, he efficiently managed the order set up by the Lord and spread his message far and wide. He gained omniscience in 515 BC and attained Nirvana in 507 BC at the ripe age of 100. After gaining omniscience, the religious order was entrusted to his principal pupil, Jambuswami. During the period of his stewardship, Sudharma Swami composed the Lord's teachings in 12 parts, which are known as 12 Anga Agamas. They are known as our original Agamas and are collectively known as Dvashangi. Dvasha means 12 and Anga means limb. As there are various limbs of the body, so there are these 12 limbs of the spiritual sign. Many of the agamas are composed in the form of questions asked by the disciple Jambuswami and the replies given by Ganadhar Sri Sudharva Swami. A brief description of those 12 agamas are here. Acharanga Sutra, it is the first and foremost agam. It deals with the code of conduct for spiritual aspirants and particularly for monks and nuns. It also covers Lord Mahavira's life during the period of renouncement. Sutranga Krutanga, it deals with different ideologies, karma, salvation and various other aspects of spiritual importance to the spiritual aspirant. Stanga Sutra, it deals with various aspects of Jainism by classifying them in one of 10 categories. Samavayanga Sutra, its pattern is similar to Stananga, but the classification extends to more than 10 categories. This and Stananga together form a sort of Jain encyclopedia. Vyakhyaya Prajnapati, this is also known as Bhagavati Sutra. It deals with thousands of questions pertaining to spiritual as well as worldly aspects raised by Gautam Swami and others and replies given by Lord Mahavira. Yanta Dharma Katanga, it conveys various aspects of Jainism in the form of stories. The story of Draupadi and the well-known story of 4 daughters-in-laws occur in this book. Upasaka Dasanga, it describes the lives of Ananda, Kamadev and 8 other laymen who adopted and religiously practiced the code of householders of Shravaks as laid by the Lord. Antakrita Dasanga, it describes the lives of 10 entities who ended the life cycle and attained liberation. Anuta Rupa Patika, it describes the lives of the entities who are reborn in Anuttara heaven. Only the souls who are destined to attain liberation in the next life are born in that heaven. Prashna Vyakarana, it describes violence and other defilement as sources of ashrava and narrates how the major 5 restraints results in samvar or prevention of karmas. Vipaka Sutra, it describes stories depicting the consequences of karma that the souls have to bear at the time of fructification of karma. Drishtivada, this anga has been lost more than 2000 years ago. It had 5 parts. One of them was known as Purvas. There were 14 Purvas in all. 4 of them were lost before 300 BC. The other Purvas were also lost later on. Many other sutras were compiled thereafter. Aside from the above mentioned Anga Agama Sutras, the following sutras are prominent. The key message here is Jainism has deep roots and we practice it based on the scriptures that have been passed down from many generations. These scriptures, called Agamas, have been authored by well qualified monks and very respected souls. We don't have the benefit of such great monks as Gautam Swami in this era, but we do have the benefit of learning and extracting those ideas from the scriptures.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोस्तुते.
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्.
Gangama. The tradition of Nagaresh states, a respectable citizen of a city is a glorious chapter of Janshashan. Says Shantidas was a generous, highly religious Nagaresh. Har Kunvar, Gangama, Mohini were other names respected in society for their sterling qualities, and they all belonged to the respectable family of Seth Shantidas. Ganga, the wife of Seth Dhalpata Bhai, was a highly religious lady. In AD 1865, Dalpat Bhai had undertaken a pilgrimage to Shatrunjaya. Venerable Moolchandra Ji Maharaj was a member of the group of pilgrims. Riddhi Chandra Ji Maharaj had arrived from Palitana. Gangama spent almost a fortune in the service of Sadhu Sadhvi and Shravaka Shravaka. She symbolized love, compassion, and service. She was a true mother to one and all, caring and loving. She was compared to Anupama Devi, who had built temples in Abu. In AD 1911, 4 Sanghas had undertaken at her instance a pilgrimage to Ahmedabad. Sri Ratna Vijay Ji composed a work to commemorate this memorable event. Once Gangama was absorbed in listening to a discourse by Acharya Sri Nemishureshwaraji. He, in his inimitable style, exhorted people not to spare any effort to protect the pilgrim centers. His speech set Gangama thinking. At that time, the British were building a guest house on the mountain of Sammet Shikarji for tourists and for those who visited the place for the purpose of hunting. Gangama disapproved of the idea. Why this assault on the sacred land of Tirthankaras, Munis and pious souls? She wondered. She was determined to do something to prevent the sacred land from becoming profane and a land for merry making and drinking bouts. She began praying Bhagavan Parshvanath. She also remembered the illustrious line of her ancestors. Seth Shantidas had fought the Aurangzeb, the religious fanatic, to protect the pilgrim centers. Gangama adored Jinshahan and had profound attachment for the places of pilgrimage. A place of pilgrimage can inspire one to scale spiritual heights. Gangama was a truly devoted soul, and her devotion to religion inspired her son to do something for the protection of centers of pilgrimage and thus for the protection of religion itself. When Gangama's son Lal Bhai brought meal for her, she placed bangles in the plate. Lal Bhai was baffled. Gangama said, Acharya Nemishureshwaraji is worried about the protection of pilgrim centers. You are a Nagar Seth and you have not given even a thought to it. If you are to remain passive, then wear these bangles and give me your authority. I will fight and sacrifice my life. These angry words of his mother inspired Lal Bhai to do something. He launched a fight against the British government and prevented it from building the guest house on Sammet Shikarji. Gangama held Sadhu Sadhvi in high esteem and would see to it that they observed the 5 Mahavratas scrupulously. She would always set high standards of personal rectitude and piety, a staunch protector of religion as she was.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोस्तुते.
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्.
Gautam Swami. In 607 BC, in the village of Gobargaon, a Brahmin couple called Vasubhuti and Prithvi Gautam, family name, had a son named Indrabhuti. He was tall and handsome. He had 2 younger brothers named Agnibhuti and Vayubhuti. All 3 were well versed in the Vedas and other rituals at an early age. They were very popular and great scholars in the state of Magad. Each one of them had 500 disciples. Once in the city of Apapa, a Brahmin named Somil was conducting a yajna, sacrificial ceremony, at his home. There were over 4,000 Brahmins present at the occasion, and there were 11 popular scholars among them. Indrabhuti stood out as a bright star. Somil was a staunch supporter of the Brahmin philosophy and was very happy during the ceremony. The whole town was excited by this event in which they were going to sacrifice the sheep and the goats. Suddenly, Somil noticed many celestial beings coming down towards his sacrificial site. He thought that this would make his offering ceremony the most popular in the history. He told the people, "Look at the sky, even the angels are coming to bless us." The whole town was eagerly looking at the sky. To their surprise, the celestial beings did not stop at their side. Instead, they went further down. Somil's ego melted away as he learned that the celestial beings paid homage to Lord Mahavir, who had come to nearby Mahasain forest. Indrabhuti was outraged by his incident and his ego was bruised. He started thinking to himself, who is this Mahavir who does not even use affluent Sanskrit but speaks the common public language of Ardhamagadhi? Everyone in the ceremony was overpowered by the mere presence of Lord Mahavir. Indrabhuti once again thought, Mahavir opposes animal sacrifices, and if he succeeds, then we Brahmins will lose our livelihood. I will debate with him. He left to challenge him. Mahavir welcomed Indrabhuti by calling him by his name, even though they had never met before. Indrabhuti was surprised, but then he said to himself, who does not know me? I am not surprised he knew my name. I wonder if he knows what I am thinking. Omniscient Mahavir knew what was going through Indrabhuti's mind. Indrabhuti, even though a great scholar, had a doubt about the existence of Atma and was thinking to himself, can Mahavir tell that I doubt the existence of the soul? The next moment Mahavir said, Indrabhuti, Atma, soul consciousness, is there and you should not question it. Indrabhuti was shocked and began to think very highly of Mahavir. Then they had a philosophical discussion, and Indrabhuti changed his beliefs and he became Mahavir's first and chief disciple. Indrabhuti was 50 years old at the time, and from then on he was called Gautam Swami because he came from Gautam family. Meanwhile, in the town, Somil and other scholars were waiting to greet the expected winner of the debate, Indrabhuti. They were shocked to learn that Indrabhuti had become the disciple of Mahavir. The other 10 Brahmin scholars also went to debate with Mahavir, also became his disciples, the same way as Indrabhuti. The people present at the Somil's place began to leave, and Somil concealed the ceremony and turned all the animals loose. One time Gautam Swami was going back after the Gochari, getting food or alms, and he noticed many people going in another direction. He asked them what was going on. They said, we are going to see Anand Shravak. He has been performing austerities and has attained a special knowledge of the Gyan. Anand Shravak was Mahavir's follower, so Gautam Swami decided to go and visit him. When Anand saw Gautam Swami coming to his house, he was very happy that his guru, spiritual teacher, was coming. However, even though he was very weak due to his austerities, he got up and welcomed Gautam Swami. Gautam Swami inquired about his condition. Anand replied, with your blessings, I am fine. After some time, Anand told Gautam Swami with respect, Reverend teacher, I have attained Avadhigyan because of which I can see as high as 14th heaven and as low as the 7th hell. Gautam Swami thought, a Shravak can attain Avadhigyan, but not to this extent. Aloud he told Anand, you should do prashchit for your imagination. Anand was puzzled. He knew what he could see, but his teacher told him to atone for telling that. So he politely asked Gautam Swami, "Does one have to atone for telling the truth?" Gautam Swami replied, "No," and then left the place thinking, "I will reconfirm this with Lord Mahavir." Gautam Swami returned to Lord Mahavir, who was sitting with his other disciples, and asked about Anand. Mahavir said, "Gautam, Anand was telling the truth. How could a person like you with so much knowledge make such a mistake? You should atone for your mistake." Mahavir believed in the truth, and he would never cover up the mistake of his disciple just to make their group look good. Gautam Swami put his arms aside and immediately went to Anand's house to ask for forgiveness for his doubt. Anand was proud of his humble teacher, who did not mind admitting his own fault to his followers. On another occasion, Gautam Swami went to town for the alms. He was returning with the kheer, a sweet made from rice and milk, in a patra when he saw 1,500 hermits. Gautam Swami felt that they were hungry and offered them the kheer. They began to wonder how Gautam Swami would feed all of them. Gautam Swami requested all the hermits to sit down, and then he served everyone with the kheer with the help of Akshiman Nasi, non-diminishing Labdhi, special power. While serving the kheer, he kept his thumb in the kheer. To everyone's surprise, they were all well served from the small patra. The hermits were also so impressed by Gautam Swami that all 1,500 decided to take Diksha, renunciation, from Lord Mahavir. Many sadhus, including those hermits, attained Keval Gyan, but Gautam Swami was still unable to achieve it. He was worried that he would never attain Keval Gyan. One day Gautam Swami asked Lord Mahavir, "There were 11 of us, main disciples, Ganadhars, who accepted Diksha, and most of them have attained Keval Gyan. Why am I so unlucky that I am not able to attain Keval Gyan?" Lord Mahavir replied, "Gautam, you have too much affection for me. In order to attain Keval Gyan, you must overcome the attachment. So until you give up your attachment towards me, it would not be possible for you to attain Keval Gyan." On the day when Mahavir was to attain Nirvana, liberation, Mahavira sent Gautam Swami out to preach to a man named Dev Sharma. On his way back, Gautam Swami learned that Lord Mahavira had attained Nirvana and reached the moksha, salvation. Gautam Swami went into a state of shock and sorrow, lamenting, "Lord Mahavira knew this was going to happen. Why did he send me away?" Gautam Swami could not stop his tears and started weeping. Within a few minutes, he came back to his senses and began thinking, maybe this was destined to happen this way. No one can live forever. No relationship is permanent. Why was I so attached to Mahavir? He contemplated that he was wrong and gave up attachment for Mahavir. During this deep thinking, he burned his ghati karmas and attained Keval Gyan at the age of 80. Gautam Swami taught and spread Jain principles for next 12 years. He attained moksha at the age of 92 in 515 BC.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते।
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्।
Ilachi Kumara. In ancient times, there was a town named Ilavardhan in which there lived a businessman named Dhandatta. He had a wife named Ilachi who gave birth to a very lovable and handsome boy. That being the only son, the parents deliberately kept him nameless. As the son of Ilachi, he became to be known as Ilachiputra. He was reared with all the loving care and attention in the midst of luxury. In due course, he grew to be a handsome youth and as such started being called Ilachikumar. His parents were now eager to get him married. Being the only son of a well-to-do family, many people offered their daughters in marriage. His parents prepared a list of selected names out of them and asked Ilachikumar to choose any one that he liked the most. But Ilachikumar could not make any decision. One day a party of acrobats came to the town. During those days there were no stadiums where acrobats could play. They had to show their skills on the open streets. Beating the drums in token of their arrival, those acrobats planted the poles in an open area of the main street and connected them with ropes. Many people assembled there to watch the show. The acrobats ascended the pole one after another and started demonstrating their skill of playing on the rope. They were walking and jumping over the high rope. People were very fascinated by the performance. Ilachikumar also had come there to watch the show. While watching the performance of the acrobats, his attention was drawn to the young girl of the chief of acrobats. She looked very smart and was dancing very gracefully to the tune of the drums with ringing jingles bells on her feet. Ilachikumar got too much enamored by her and could not move his glance from her. At the end of the show, the acrobats came down the rope and started collecting money from the people who had assembled for the show. People were very pleased with the performance and paid handsomely. Thus, collecting good amount, the acrobats left the place and everyone went home. Ilachikumar also had to go home. He was, however, so much fascinated by the girl that he remained absorbed in thoughts about her and could not fix his mind anywhere else. At lunchtime, his parents called him to join. There too he remained silent and finished the lunch without uttering a single word. His parents had never seen him so serious and wondered about his absent-mindedness. His father asked him about the reason for his seriousness, but he kept quiet. After the father left, the mother lovingly asked him to speak out whatever was in his mind. Ilachikumar said that it was no use telling her about that. As she repeatedly asked him, he finally replied that his mind was attracted towards the girl of the acrobats and he wanted to marry her. His mother was taken aback to hear that. She said that she could get him very beautiful and lovable girls from well-to-do families and asked him to forget that wretched acrobat girl. He replied that no other girl would attract his mind and he wanted to marry only that girl. Realizing the firmness of his mind, the mother told her husband about their son's intentions. Dhandatta was shocked to hear this. He tried to dissuade the son from his intention, but Ilachikumar remained firm. Dhandatta was a sensible man. He could see that Ilachikumar would not stay peaceful without that girl. He did not want to lose his son for the sake of prestige. He therefore called the chief of acrobats and requested him to give his daughter in marriage to Ilachikumar. The acrobat, however, said that he could not do that because she was bound by the convention of his tribe. Dhanadatta thought that he might be looking for getting money for the girl. He therefore offered to give as much wealth as the acrobat wanted for agreeing to marry his daughter to his son. The acrobat, however, declined his offer and replied that he could not break the convention. Dhandatta then asked him about his tribal convention. The acrobat said that he could give his daughter only to the person who could win an award from a royal court by pleasing the king with his acrobatic skill and would give dinner to his community out of the prize money. Dhandatta was disappointed to hear that because it was apparently impossible for his son to fulfill that condition. He explained to his wife what had happened. She called her son and said that the girl would marry only to an expert acrobat and asked him to forget her. Elachkumar did not give any reply. He, however, could not change his mind. He felt that he could not survive without that girl and was willing to make any sacrifice for her. He was even prepared to learn the acrobatic skill for that purpose. His parents were baffled by his silence, but thought that he would come to senses in due course. They felt confident that Elachkumar could never become an expert acrobat. As Elachkumar continued to remain absent-minded, they tried to divert his mind. All their efforts, however, failed, and Elachkumar stayed bent upon getting that girl somehow. When the acrobat group therefore decided to leave Ilavardhan, Elachkumar secretly slipped from his home and left town along with them. He discarded his fancy clothes and, donning the coarse clothes of acrobats, he started learning their skill. He was smart by nature and used all his diligence to learn the acrobatics. The girls who got enamored of him and helped him in all possible ways to learn the skill. With her help, he could easily master the skill and soon became an expert acrobat. In due course, when the group reached the city of Venatat, he requested the father of the girl to organize a show at the royal court there. Thereafter, the chief went to the king and requested him to watch the performance of the young acrobat and to award a suitable prize if it was thought fit. The king agreed, and accordingly the acrobat fixed the pose in the compound of the royal palace, where the officers of the state and the light of the city were invited to watch the performance. At the right time, the king occupied his seat in the balcony of the palace. Going to him, Elachkumar went over the pole and then, jumping over the rope, he started displaying his acrobatic skill. He was tightly walking over the high rope, intercepted with risky jumps and somersaults. It was a superb performance. No one had ever watched such acrobatic feats. Everyone was highly fascinated by his skill. Elachkumar was feeling gratified by the appreciation of the people. He thought that it would have been enough for pleasing the king too. He therefore came down and, bowing to him again, he requested for an appropriate award. The king was, however, more fascinated by the young girl than by the performance. He thought that he could easily gain her if he somehow got rid of the acrobat. He therefore pretended that his mind was too much occupied with the problems of the state and could not give attention to the performance. He therefore requested Elachkumar to show his skill again. Accordingly, Elachkumar got over the rope again and displayed his skill. At the end of that show, when he came down, the king pretended to be drowsy and asked him to show the performance again. Elachkumar could not believe that. He suspected that there was something wrong somewhere. Since he was, however, keen to gain his long-cherished goal of getting married to the girl, he decided to try again. He again started the rope walk, which to him was as easy as walking on the plain surface. He triumphantly looked around. From that height, he noticed at a little distance that a beautiful woman was offering sweet food to a monk. She was in the prime of her youth and was very attractive and highly graceful. Elachkumar was, however, surprised to observe that the monk was not even looking at her. He was amazed to see that while he himself was hankering for the acrobatic girl, the monk remained totally unaffected in the presence of that lovely woman. He was struck by the detachment of the monk. He compared the girl of his choice with that woman. The acrobat girl was no doubt attractive, but the woman there was far more attractive. What could have been the force that kept the monk aloof in presence of that woman? And while remaining aloof, happiness was evident on his face. This detachment of the monk raised a quick train of thoughts in the mind of Elachkumar. How come? I do not get detached, even though I have been repeatedly asked by the king to show the performance. He recalled the excuses of the king for making him perform on the rope again and again. He could suspect that the king was in all probability attracted by the girl and was waiting for his fall from the rope. In that case, I would never secure the girl for whom I have abandoned my home and the parents. The happiness that he was looking for was an illusion. At home, he had been a little exposed to the religious principles. He had learned about the soul within the body and its immense capabilities. He realized that his achievement as an acrobat must have been due to that inner capability. That monk could remain unaffected because he remained tuned to his soul and stayed vigilant about the pitfalls. As an acrobat, I also have to remain constantly vigilant because the slightest unawareness on my path can result in fall from the height and consequent death. Why then should I not use the same vigilance for the sake of the spiritual uplift? He had treaded a long path of spiritual pursuit in early life. The impact of that achievement was lying subdued within, waiting for an opportunity to manifest itself. The sight of the monk provided the needed opportunity. He became fully awakened, realizing that he was the soul and all the other situations were simply illusory. While on the rope, he dwelt deep into his self and attained omniscience. Then he quietly climbed down and bid farewell to everyone as he left the place. The focus of this is on the principle of detachment. Attachment can be to a materialistic things or to people, feelings. Oftentimes, attachment causes us to behave in ways that may be hurtful to others and are inconsistent with the principles of Jainism. We should strive to minimize our attachments, detach ourselves, and focus on our souls. Our souls don't require any type of attachment to materialistic things or people in order to attain omniscience. A soul is completely detached and leaves everything behind when it moves to the next life.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते।
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्।
Greatness of Namokar mantra. Once upon a time, Prince Jivendra recited Namokar mantra to a dying dog, and due to its effect, the dog became a heavenly deity called Sudarshan Yakshendra. From there, he came down to Jivendra and greeted him with much respect. Aiso Pancha Namoka Namo Yaro Savva Pavan Panasano Mangala Nanche Savve Singh Padamam Bhaivai Mangalam. The meaning of the above verse is that reciting of the Namokar mantra destroys all evil effects, and this mantra is supreme in auspiciousness. Disciple, can we attain any one out of these 5 worthy poses? Teacher, yes, you can attain all the 5 poses from the human life. We can see that the last 3 souls are present even today in a group of Jain saints called Sangha, and they practice the scriptures to become worthy and liberated souls. There is another one, punishment for insulting Namokar mantra. A student asks, so please tell me why the king is putting his feet on the auspicious word Namokar mantra. Teacher, Emperor Subhom Chakravarti was the ruler of the 6 khandas of the universe. A stellar divine Jyotish Dev wanted to kill him out of enmity, but he could not do so as the king was reciting and remembering the Namokar mantra. Cunningly, the divine asked the emperor to write down the holy verse and put it under his feet. Only then he will let him go. The king did so reluctantly. For humiliating the holy work, the divine was able to drown the king in the ocean. After the death, the king was born in the seventh hell. There is also reward for the devotion to a true divine. Once upon a time, a frog took a petal of lotus in its mouth. With great pleasure, it started its journey for the darshan of Lord Mahavir. In the way, it was trodden under the foot of the elephant of King Shrenik. It died with holy thought and was born in heaven as deity. From there, he at once came down for worship in the Samoharan of Lord Mahavir Swami. Seeing the mark of frog in his crown, King Shrenik asked about him from Gautam Ganadhar. All the persons were very much pleased to know the importance and reward of having the thoughts of Deva Darshan. Look, children, even the thought to have the darshan of Jinendra Dev gives you a lot of punya. Never go to a temple or a spiritual teacher with empty hands. You should carry with you rice, nuts, almonds or fruit and place them in front of them on altar while doing darshan. Punishment for insulting the idol of a god, true divine. Once upon a time, Queen Kanakodhari, who was proud of being the empress, got angry with her step-queen. She got a Jain idol brought from the temple of her step-queen and threw it out in the open. On the advice of Arika Sanyam Shri, the queen got back the idol from outside and again consecrated it in the temple. The queen thereafter worshipped the idol in many ways and observed punishment vows. The queen in her next birth became Anjana, the wife of Pavan. Because of her act of sin, she was separated from her husband for 22 years and suffered a lot of miseries. Dear children, you should never insult a Jain idol by heart, words or deeds. Reward for devotion to the spiritual saints. After the holy deaths, Samadhi of Shrupta Kevali, Sri Bhadrabahu, his disciple, Maurya Emperor Chandragupta, as a Jain saint, lived and worshipped the consecrated feet of his spiritual teacher for 12 years in the jungle, with the result that the deities established a city there and served food to the saint. When the group of saints came back, one of the munis forgot his kamandal there. After taking the food, in the afternoon he returned to fetch it. He saw that the kamandal was hanging on a branch of a tree. On seeing this, he realized that the deities were pleased with the devotion of Muni Chandragupta towards his precept, and so they had served them food. Jain Munis do not accept meals from the hands of deities. Therefore, Muni Chandragupta repented and observed punishment oath. Dear children, it is not strange that even the divine gods worship those who worship their spiritual teachers, because it is the cause of even salvation. Punishment for humiliating the saints. Once a group of saints, Chaturvedi Sangha, comprising of Muni, Aryika, Shravak and Shravika, was passing through a village called Antik. They were going to Samvet Shikharji. On seeing the nude, naked saints, all people of the village began to laugh and humiliated them. One potter even asked them not to do so, and he himself prayed and worshipped the sun. After some time, a big fire broke out in the village. 60,000 persons were burnt alive and died together. For insulting the saints, all of them were born in the category of shell with 2 indriyas. Thereafter, they were reborn as Jigajai. After many births and deaths, they all were born as the sons of Sagar Chakravarti. So children, from this we learn that to laugh and insult others is a sin, all the more when you do so to saints, it is the greatest sin. Vow not to eat after sunset. Once a jackal took a vow of not to take food of all the 4 kinds in night hours after sunset. From a Jain saint named Sagar said, one day the jackal was very thirsty. He got down in a bawadi to quench his thirst. There was darkness in the well. Taking it to be night, he came up in the open. Seeing light on the surface, he again went down. Again and again he walked up and down, presuming the darkness as night. On account of his vow for not taking anything in night, he died. With the influence of this vow, he was born as a human being and was named as Pritinkar Kumar. He accepted Muni Diksha and liberated himself from all his karmas and attained salvation. Look, children, by eating in night, human beings are born as animals in their next birth, like owl, cat, etc. Moreover, an animal not only became a human being but the god by liberating his soul from karma bondage. Therefore, all of us should accept a vow of not eating in the night.
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते।
Jaina Agama Gyan.
नमो अर्हन्ताणं नमो सिद्धाणं नमो आयर्याणं नमो उवज्जयाणं नमो लोये सपसहूणम्।
Jambu Swami. One of the sisters asked the brother, last Tirthankara, Lord Mahavira was completely passionless and omniscient. Was there any other similar personality? Yes, sister, said the brother. After Mahavir, Gautam Swami, Subramacharya and Jambu Swami were completely omniscient and passionless. The last omniscient of this era was Jambu Swami. Sister said, was Jambu Swami also a prince like Mahavir Swami? Brother said, no, sister. He was the son of a wealthy merchant of Rajagriha. His father was Arahadas and mother Janmati. He was born on the last day of the Falgun month. Jambu Kumar occupied an important place in the court of King Shranik and the contemporary community. Many wealthy persons of the city wanted to offer their daughters to Jambu Kumar in marriage, and 4 such girls were already betrothed to him. But, sister said, but what? Brother said, but since childhood he was strongly averse to worldly possessions. His mind used to be agitated for psychic happiness, and as such he declined to marry. Sister said, declined? Abandoned relations after betrothal? Did not marry? Brother said, yeah, he wished not to marry at all. But when the girls knew this, they decided to marry none other than Jambu Kumar, or otherwise to remain unmarried. Oh, then parents of Jambu Kumar and all the 4 girls requested Jambu Kumar not to refuse to marry. They allowed him to get initiated into monkhood after the marriage celebration, because they knew that all the 4 beautiful girls will charm the mind of Jambu Kumar, and then he would forget to renounce the world. But then what? Jambu Kumar agreed to marry, but he could not be attracted towards worldly sensual pleasures. Did the marriage not materialize? Marriage did take place, but just the next day Jambu Kumar left home, family associations, wealth and belongings, and all the 4 goddess-like wives, and got initiated into the order of the Jain monks. Oh, what were the names of his wives? Did they not persuade him not to join the order of monks? They were Padmashri, Kamalashri, Vinayshri and Rupashri. With their passionate gestures, good looks, service and cleverness, they tried their level best to detain Jambu Kumar at home. But they could not move him, for he wanted to drink deep of the spiritual bliss by self-realization. Sister, it was all right. The feelings of attachments of the worldly people cannot influence the spiritually minded people. Rays of consciousness and asceticism are powerful enough to destroy attachment and ignorance. You are correct, sister. His consciousness and asceticism influenced the chief Vidyut Chor, who had entered the house of Jambu Kumar that very night for stealing. He also accepted the order of Jain saints after hearing the discussions of Jambu Kumar with his newly married wives and understanding his deep feelings of renunciation. What happened to those girls? They also broke themselves from the sensory pleasures of life, turned towards renunciation, and got initiated as she monks of the Jain order. Jambu Kumar's parents also got initiated into monkhood. Thus the whole atmosphere was permeated with asceticism. Monk Jambu Kumar engrossed himself deeply in spiritual contemplation. On the 7th day of second half of Magha month, the day when his preceptor Sudharmacharya obtained complete liberation, he achieved omniscience. Oh, as with the days of liberation of Mahavir and the day of obtaining omniscience by Gautam, the day of liberation of Sudharmacharya and the day of achieving omniscience by Jambu Kumar are the same. Yes, after that Jambu Kumar preached the gospels of religion for 18 years from Magad to Mathura, and ultimately he obtained the state of Nirvana from Chaurashi, Mathura. In Rajagir there lived was a very good merchant named Rishabhadat, who was also known as Ahradas. His wife Dharani alias Jinmati gave birth to a very handsome son in 542 BC. The boy was named Jambu. He turned out to be a very bright and intelligent. Everyone liked him. As he grew up, many families were eager to get him married to their daughters. Since it was the age of polygamy, his parents selected 8 girls of reputed families, and Jambu was duly engaged with them. Prior to the marriage, Jambu once went to the assembly of Sudharma Swami and was very much impressed by the sermon. He developed a very high sense of detachment and decided to renounce his worldly life. His parents were of course not happy about his renouncing at such a young age. Parents of the girls he was engaged to were also very perturbed. They were worried about their daughters, since no one else would accept them because of their being already engaged to him. All of them pressed Jambu to give up his intention. They pointed out the rigors of ascetic life that he would not be able to face. They also told him that it is very hard to lead the life of a monk and advised him lead a comfortable family life. However, he remained firm. The parents thought that he would change his mind if he gets married. They therefore insisted upon his getting married before renouncing. Jambu agreed on the condition that he should be allowed to renounce the day after his marriage. Since the girls to whom he was engaged were very beautiful and attractive, everyone thought that he would surely gain attachment for them once he is married. The elders therefore accepted that condition. The wedding took place on a grand scale. Jambu's parents and those of the girls viewed with one another in show of their prosperity. No effort was left out to make the wedding a memorable ceremony. Highly distinguished guests graced the occasion. Jewelry and other precious gifts that were adorned upon the newlyweds were the envy of the city. Rajagruhi had rarely witnessed such pomp and splendor. Everyone congratulated Jambu for getting such beautiful and glamorous wives and wished him perfect happiness. At night, Jambu was in elegantly decorated bedroom along with his wives, and the elders heaved a sigh of relief. Jambu was, however, not at all affected by the glamour, nor was he overcome by the beauty of those lovely girls. He had made up his mind to renounce the next day and wanted to make use of the night for orienting those girls for the purpose. He sat in front of them and started explaining the purely temporary and transitory character of life and everything pertaining to that. At that time, in the vicinity of Rajagrihi, there was a burglar named Prabhav. He had been a prince of India but had a falling out with his parent on the issue of some property. He therefore left the place and had taken a burglary. He had gathered with him 500 colleagues who were willing to undertake any sort of adventure at his command. He had acquired a device to put anyone to sleep, and he could break any type of lock. He came to know of the fabulous treasure accumulated on the occasion of Jambu's wedding and had decided to grab it. At dead of the night, he came to the place along with his followers and saw that everyone had gone to sleep because of the exhaustion of the ceremony. He asked his colleagues to pick up the valuables as he proceeded towards Jambu's bedroom for the jewelry on the bodies of newlyweds. From a little distance he heard Jambu talking to his wives. He could not believe that the newlyweds were still awake. He came close to the door and tried to listen, expecting exciting love gossip. To his utter astonishment, Jambu was talking about the true nature of life. His words were so forceful that Prabhav could not stop listening. Jambu's talk was appealing not only to his wives but also to Prabhav. He started thinking that he had fallen out with his parents and others for the sake of some possessions and was leading the nasty life of a burglar, while here was a young boy planning to give up everything that he had effortlessly gained. Jambu's talk was still going on. The more Prabhav listened, the more he hated himself. His men came to him with bundles of valuables, pointing out that it was getting dawn and they should leave. But Prabha was not listening to them. He had developed disdain for his current life and was keen to change it. Ultimately, he told his followers to leave him alone because he had decided to give up burglary. They could therefore go on their own. All of them were separated at that night. They said that they could not go anywhere without him. If he was giving up the occupation, they were also willing to give it up. By that time, Jambu had finished. His wives were convinced of the futility of the worldly life and had decided to renounce with him. Then Prabhav came inside and said that he had come up for the burglary but had decided to renounce after listening his talk to his wives. He and his 500 followers made up their mind to be Jambu's pupils. In the morning, news spread everywhere that Jambu was going to renounce that day along with his wives. His parents were disappointed that their intention did not materialize. They did not have any incentive to continue the household life and decided to renounce, and so was the decision of the girl's parents. A spectacular procession was organized leading all those 500 plus people to the assembly of Sudharma Swami. Jambu became his pupil and Prabhav and his colleagues became Jambu's pupils. Jambu Swami, as he became known, henceforth studied this entire teaching of Lord Mahavira. Most of Jain scriptures are composed in the form of dialogue from Sudharma Swami to Jambu Swami. He became the head of the religious order when Sudharma Swami attained omniscience. He himself attained it at the age of 36. He was the last omniscient of the current time cycle. He attained nirvana at the age of 80. Jambu Swami firmly believed in renouncing the worldly life from the start. In fact, his words, sermons were so powerful that it ultimately led hundreds. Jambu Swami firmly believed in renouncing the worldly life from the start. In fact, his words, sermons were so powerful that it ultimately led hundreds of others to follow him in the pursuit of omniscience through the disciplined life of an ascetic. He realized that marital happiness and enjoyment of physical beauty of his 8 wives is all superficial and temporary. The key is to focus on purifying the soul and helping others to do the
यदक्षरपदभ्रष्टं
same.
मात्राहीनं च यद्भवेत् तत्सर्वं क्षम्यतां देव महावीर नमोऽस्तु ते।